Hello there, everyone, and welcome back to the Showing Up to Life podcast and YouTube channel. My name is Art Burns, and I'm here today for the third day in a row, and I'm really excited for that. As many of you know, I used to do this podcast every single day, Monday through Friday, but I don't do that anymore. I do it as, sort of as it comes to me, if you will. But I've realized how much I enjoy doing it, and I realized how much I was missing doing it. So here I am for a third day in a row. But really, I'm here not for my own satisfaction, not only for my own satisfaction, but also to deliver what I believe to be a pretty important message. But really, one of the most basic messages that I could deliver to you in the context of mindfulness. And that is, I want to talk about judgment today. All right. Now, judgment, or let's say this, when we practice mindfulness and when we learn mindfulness, right, what we're practicing and learning is really non-judging awareness, right? To be aware of the experience, whether that's external experience or internal experience, and to be aware of that experience without judging it as good or bad or right or wrong, okay? Now, this seems like such a basic concept, really, and it is. It certainly is a very basic concept. It's one of the most basic concepts you can possibly consider, in fact. But yet, beneath the basic nature of it, it's very, very complex in the way that it shows up in our lives, right? And the truth of it, and the reality of this, and the reason why I want to talk about this today is that it's so important. Virtually every negative emotion you experience, virtually all the anxiety you experience, virtually all of the regret and rumination and fear and all this stuff that we experience, almost all of that at its very, very core starts with a judgment. Now, before we go into any further into that, let's talk about the difference between something like judgment and something like morals. Okay? Because even morals don't have to be good or bad, right? Like it still does not require judgment. But a lot of people conflate these two concepts. And certainly I've told you all before that I do work with some people who are deeply Christian and deeply religious and committed to that sort of worldview and that sort of way of life and that belief system, right? And in Christianity, there's a very strong sort of moral code. I think all religions have a strong moral code, but I'm familiar with the Christianity one. And I can tell you that there is a very, very strong moral code with that, right? Now, the problem is, again, just because we say that, say a sin is committed, again, in the parlance of the Catholic Church and the Christian religion, a sin is committed, right? We automatically, sort of associate that sin with being bad. Right. And I think this is the reason I bring that up is because I think a lot of people, and this is probably true again in many religions, I think a lot of people are, allowing themselves to, sort of leak into that or sort of, again, conflate these two concepts. Okay. Because we don't have to call it good or bad. Right. It doesn't have to show up that way. Right? Even if we say something is, against my moral code, well, then that thing is immoral in my view. And in my view is the very important part of that sentence, right? Because in your moral code, maybe that thing is not immoral. So therefore, how could it be good or bad if it's completely different based on our own beliefs? Right? And that's the concept of non-judging awareness right there, or the concept of judgment right there, which is to say that, that in any given circumstances, the whether something is favorable or unfavorable is completely subjective. Right. Just yesterday, I was in a meeting with one of my clients, and we were talking about this, and this is really the inspiration for talking about this today. So you know who you are, buddy, and I appreciate this because this is really, really just as I told him yesterday, I taught him something yesterday that I've never taught before, but I'm going to tell you about it today because it's so important, right? So anyway, when I experience something, anything, right? Or let me be specific. I had this specific example I wanted to give. So sitting in traffic, right? Now you could go literally, and I've said this before on this podcast, I've said it in so many meetings, so many presentations. You could go to any city on earth. Okay, literally any city. If you had an interpreter with you who knew the language in any city on earth, you could go up to any person in that city, potentially every person in that city, and ask, is traffic good or bad? And I mean, 100% of the time, I believe, or at least 99% of the time, you're going to hear traffic is bad. Of course it's bad. Who likes traffic? Everybody hates traffic. Traffic sucks. It's in the way. It's inconvenient. It's terrible. It's bad. Right? I think we can all accept that, right? Because we all feel that, right? We all feel like nobody wants to be stuck in traffic. So therefore we associate traffic as bad, right? But think through this little thought experiment with me, okay? Imagine a traffic jam in which there are two cars next to each other stuck, right? And this is a snarled traffic jam. There's some kind of accident or something. It's, completely nothing's moving, right? It's the mother of all traffic jams, right? And in one car, the car on the right, let's say, there's a guy who's trying to get to the hospital because his wife is in labor. She went into labor while he was at work. She's early, but she's there at the hospital, and he's trying to get there to be there for the birth of his child, right? Now, to that guy, this traffic is horrible. This is the worst thing ever. Like, how could this happen to me? This is terrible. I'm going to miss the birth of my child because of this traffic, potentially. But now let's say the car next to him on the left is a man, same age, let's say, same ethnic background and everything like that, right? But this guy is an enlisted soldier in the army, and he is on the way to the airport with his wife and his daughter, who's, say, 3 years old. And he's not going to see these people for for 2 years once he gets out of this car, right? So do you think to that guy, this 20-minute delay is bad? I mean, to him, this is manna from heaven. To him, this is a blessing. Oh my gosh, thank you. I get this extra time with my kid. We can sing an extra song. We can play an extra game of tic-tac-toe or something. I don't know. But the point is that these two cars are sitting right next to each other in the same traffic jam. So if one is thinking that this traffic jam is good and the other is thinking that the traffic jam is bad, then how could it really be either? Or how could it not be both? And so that's the essence of non-judging awareness. That traffic is just traffic. It's just, it slows you down. It makes you late. It's inconvenient. It's it might trigger you in certain ways. It's uncomfortable. All these things are true, or it's a blessing. Like I didn't want to get there so fast for whatever reason. But the point is that neither of those things can be called universally and absolutely good or bad. They just can't be. Now, as I always say, right, when I, and I've told you all this before, and I've told, again, countless presentations, this is always in my shtick, right, which is that, and any new clients that I talk to, I mean, this is in the first meeting I talk about this, right? Which is to say that, when we start practicing mindfulness, right, it's okay, you're going to start practicing now, right? So people have this sense like, okay, I've never practiced before, so I'm going to start practicing now, right? But the thing that we have to understand, or a thing that's very helpful to understand, is that we have been practicing our whole lives. One way or the other, wittingly or unwittingly, we've been practicing something our whole lives, because basically practice is just your habit. Every time you do something the same way, you're building a skill of that thing. You're building a habitual skill. An automatic sort of go-to, right? Now, this exists on the neuronal level, it exists on the emotional level, and it exists on the sort of mechanical level of our bodies. And most of all, it exists in the storytelling of our mind, right? That's where it's really important to see it, right? But the point that I'm making here is that you have, let's say, when you were 5 years old, you were in the car with your parents who said, this traffic is terrible. And they said it every time you got into traffic. This traffic is so bad. Okay, we got to leave early so we beat the traffic, right? We're not going to leave now because it's going to get stuck in traffic, and traffic's terrible. We don't want to get stuck in traffic. And so all your childhood, you were, reinforced this belief that traffic is bad. And so now, every time you think of traffic, every time traffic just pops into your mind in any circumstance, it's associated with bad. Now, of course, traffic is just one example, right? And we could talk about so many other examples, right? Like a headache, for instance, right? Most people, I'm not going to say us because I don't do this anymore, but at one point I was, but most people, and they get the slightest headache, the first thing they're going to do is grab the Advil, toss a couple down, right? Or maybe even if it's a natural solution, they're going to do something to intervene in the headache because the headache is bad. Headache is not bad. Headache is your body telling you something. Maybe you need to drink something. Maybe you need to eat something. Maybe you didn't sleep enough. Maybe you had too much caffeine. Maybe you had too much, adult beverages last night. Maybe you're, cigarette smoking or cannabis smoking or lack of exercise, right? There's nearly innumerable reasons why you might have that headache, but there is a reason. And the headache is there to show you that reason. The headache is there so that you can intervene in a process way, not just to medicate it and make it go away so you can just keep doing what you're doing, drink the caffeine, don't sleep, and do all this stuff that you're doing, right? Your headache is telling you there's something about the way that you're going about things that is not healthy for me as your body. That's not a bad thing. How could that be bad? Getting a cold. The symptoms of the cold are your body fighting off this virus that's inside you. How could that be bad? That's your body doing something that's trying to help you. How could that be bad? Stress even, right? Stress. Everybody will say distress is bad, just like traffic. But stress is, if we learn to work with stress, we learn to understand our stress, well, then the stress that we feel in our body can be just like the headache, where it's a signal to us. It's telling you, hey, dude, something is going on that's causing you this tension in your body. And that, my friends, brings us back to the thesis of this podcast episode, which is at the core of all of your stress responses is a judgment. There is somewhere all the way down there at the beginning where you said, this thing is bad. And that's where it starts, right? That, as soon as you say it's bad, right? As soon as you categorize it as bad in your mind, you now need to get rid of that. You got to get rid of it. You cannot allow this thing to hang around because it's dangerous, because it's bad, right? If it's bad, it's dangerous. If it's dangerous, it's going to hurt me, and I can't be hurt. And your brain and your nervous system will not stand for that. It will not allow this thing to hang around that is bad. So we feel aversion to that thing, right? Like the headache. Oh, no, I can't have this headache. I got to fix it. I got to do something. Oh, I can't have a cold right now. I got a big meeting. I got to take some kind of syrup to make my cold symptoms go away. Now, there's nothing wrong with doing that. If you choose to medicate yourself so you can continue on your lifestyle, I'm not saying that's not bad, right? I'm like, that's the thing, right? But it might not be healthy, But then again, in being not healthy, it doesn't mean that, doing it once or twice is some kind of, horrible catastrophe for you, And that's where wisdom comes in. When we cease to judge things, we then allow for wisdom. We allow ourselves to say, okay, yeah, I know that these symptoms in my body are trying to get me to slow down, because my body needs to fight off this infection, right? But I know that today I have this certain meeting on which, much of my career is going to hinge, and this is too important for me not to attend. So I have to make the choice between giving my body the rest that it desires right now and knowing that I can muscle through it with the help of these chemicals, and then I can allow my body to do the resting, right? That sort of thing. And of course, that's just one simple example, but this is the process. That's the thing, right? That it's not like, oh, I can do that for a cold, but I can't do that for a huge decision at work or something like that, right? Or the decision whether to start a family, right? Like that, that's got to be good or bad, right? No, it's always 100%. It's always the same process. That as soon as I judge something, as soon as I call something bad, I am going to experience aversion to that thing. And as soon as I call something good, I'm going to cling to it. I'm going to become attached to that thing. Now, in a very, real way, this is where, again, well, let me not say this. So anytime that happens, anytime I feel bad, I call something bad, I feel aversion. I call something good, I experience attachment, right? Now, from attachment and aversion, there is no chance that I am going to experience anything but negative emotions. As soon as I feel negative emotions, my whole body apparatus, right? My physical body is going to start feeling tension. And then the tension in my physical body combined with the emotions are going to be sort of overheard by my brain. And there's a certain part of my brain that's looking out for any kind of trouble. And this is a representation of trouble, right? Something's wrong. Something's bad here. Now, what's going to happen then is that the story in my mind is going to shift. The story in my mind is going to become, critical, pessimistic, negative, doubting, all kinds of negative aspects. And guess what that's going to cause? That's going to cause a negative emotion. The negative emotion causes more tension in the body. More tension in the body causes more thoughts. And by now, we're full on stress response. We're full on sympathetic nervous system response right now. And we are, our heart rate is elevated, our blood pressure is increased, our respiratory system is shortened and shallower, our senses are sharpening, ready for some kind of attack, right? But we're just sitting here saying that, it's bad that I missed this meeting, or I didn't get to go out with my friends, and that's bad, right? Look at all this that's happening because of that simple judgment that we made. Now, of course, I'm just throwing around these examples, but this can apply to any single situation in your life. I promise you that. I promise you, every time you feel that sense of tension and that emotional and that thought-based response, I promise you that 99.9% of the time, it's because there's a judgment involved. There's at the very core of this, there's this tiny little kernel in which you said this is bad or this is good. So what do we do about this then? Right? Because it's a simple concept. I could talk for an hour and just keep repeating the same stuff and different, examples and stuff like that. But who needs that, right? You want to know what you can do about it. I'm sure at least one of you out there is asking, what can I do about this? Well, this is the practice of mindfulness. This is what we do in mindfulness. But I have a new way to practice mindfulness that I want to share with you today. All right. Again, you are all the second person to hear this, right? The first person to hear this was just yesterday at like 6:30 in the evening. I have never shared this, although it's something that I have practiced since the beginning, right? I don't know why I never shared it. It's not really a traditional practice, I guess. And I don't know why it never occurred to me to teach this to anybody, but it really is, I think, going to be a game changer for so many people. So here we go. Now, for me, the reason why I did this and the reason why it was like I was very, very committed to this practice because I was a mindfulness teacher. right? And if I'm a mindfulness teacher, right, and supposed to be teaching non-judging awareness, and I'm sitting here saying, "Oh, that's good and that's bad and that's good and that's bad," well, that's not okay, right? That is a sign of somebody who is not, they're not walking the talk, as they say, right? And I'm all about walking the talk, right? So what I did was I paid attention to that vocabulary. I paid attention to every time I used the word bad or I used the word good, right? Now, why is this a beautiful mindfulness practice? Because mindfulness is just about paying attention, right? And in a way that is non-judging, right? So as long as we're not judging that, oh, I just used the word bad, as long as we're not judging that, well, that was bad that I used the word bad, right? Or good that I used the word bad. As long as we're not judging it, then we're paying attention with non-judging awareness, right? So here's the assignment. Here's the practice, right? As you're going through your days, moment by moment, just notice every time you say something is bad or something is good. And then after you notice, and sometimes it's not going to be till like an hour after, right? Like, oh man, I told that guy that his the linguine that he made was good, like that I failed, like I screwed it up, right? You didn't screw anything up, of course, and you didn't fail. This is part of the practice, right? And this is where I'll remind you that the practice is always about the temporary or the impermanent failures, right? Like, if you go to the gym, right, and you just, if you, let's say you went to the gym and you saw somebody just standing there holding a barbell over their shoulder like this, right? If you are on the podcast, I'm sort of making like the bicep flex sign, right? But imagine me holding a weight there, right? And just holding it, just still, just like this for 20 minutes. People in the gym will be like, what's that guy doing? That's so weird. He's doing that. That's not going to work. He's not going to build muscles that way. Because we all intuitively know that in order to build muscles, we must release, then contract, then release, then contract. That's the way it works. And that's the way it works with our minds and our physical brains as well, is that we have to experience the failing, right? We have to make the mistake, notice the mistake, correct the mistake. That's the flex, right? That's the release and contract. So failure is beautiful with these practices. Failure is something we welcome with open arms. Notice I'm not saying it's good, right? Because I've trained myself now. I've done this for 5 years now, and I almost never use the word good or bad. Now, here's the thing. Once we've noticed it, and again, even if it's hours later, it does not matter. And it also does not matter how many times this happens. Even if it happens 300 times a day, it's okay. Okay, because that's a lot of practice, and that's good. You see, I almost did it. That's beneficial for you. Okay? So the practice then is noticing when we're using the words either good or bad. Later on, you can expand this into like right and wrong, and I think there's some others. But anyway, just start with good and bad, because we all do it. We all do it. But honestly, it's a lazy act to call something bad. It's such a blanket that covers so many different words and different descriptors and different, circumstances and qualities of our lives. So now, once we've noticed that we've used the word good or bad, again, even if it's hours later, we now ask ourselves, or we invite ourselves to choose a more descriptive word. Now, here's the thing. Anything is more descriptive than good or bad. So it's not about sitting here and trying to find the perfect word and trying to do it exactly right, coming up with it. We're not writing poetry here, right? That's not the idea. You're still just going through your day, communicating with each other, and it should be smooth and it should be fluid. We're not asking you to stop everything and find that perfect word to use, because that's an attachment of its own. We don't want to do that, right? Because that is unbeneficial to us. I could have said bad, right? And it is bad, right? I mean, it doesn't mean that it's not bad, right? But it also means that it is not bad. So we can use a different word, right? We can use unbeneficial. Technically unbeneficial would be technically negative, bad, etc. But unbeneficial is more descriptive for what I mean. So sitting in traffic. What if I sit here and I say, oh, this is so bad that I'm stuck in traffic? Well, wait a minute. It's inconvenient right now that I'm stuck in this traffic. It's inconvenient for me personally in my own experience that I'm stuck in traffic. Because that dude back there, that 20-year-old kid who's got nothing really going on right now, he's just listening to his tunes, doesn't look like this is bad for him at all. And if I was in his position, it wouldn't be bad either. So for me right now, it is inconvenient. It is a source of difficulty for me. Okay? Something good, right? Like, my wife's spaghetti, right? It's good. Sure, I could say it's good, but that's lazy. I could also say it's delicious. I could say it's warming, it's fulfilling, it's nourishing. And yes, all these things could be considered good. They're on the good side of the spectrum, right? The positive side, which is also why when we talk about emotions, right? We don't talk about good emotions and bad emotions. We talk about positive emotions and negative emotions, which is not mapped out to good and bad. Positive emotions are attractive emotions. Those are emotions that pull me closer to something. Whereas negative emotions are repellent emotions, emotions that get me away from this thing. If I love something, I want to get closer to it. That's positive attraction. If I'm afraid of something, I'm going to get the heck away from it. That's negative repulsion, right? There's no good or bad there, because sometimes fear is a wonderful ally to us, whereas sometimes love can be a terrible detriment to us. If you've ever loved someone who doesn't love you back, you know what I mean. Infidelity, exploitation, all kinds of things can come from love that are very, very painful. But yet, ask anybody in the world, and love is good, right? Well, not for everyone. So therefore, love itself can't be one thing if it's different for everyone. Just like traffic, just like the weather. Some people love the heat. Heat is good. Some people hate the heat. Heat is bad. No, heat is just heat. So for the person who loves heat, heat is comfortable. I feel energized in this heat. To people who feel the heat is bad, heat is uncomfortable. I feel drained in the heat. You see that? You see how easy it is to change that wording? And the more we do that, remember, what we said is that you have been practicing labeling things good and bad your whole life, right? Ever since the very early days that we're all doing it. It's not something wrong with you. It's not bad that you've done this, but you've done it just like I have, just like my client yesterday has, just like, 90-something% of all of us, And so it does not take, here's the important thing, it does not take a whole lifetime. Let's say you're, my average age group in demographics, I was looking this up last night actually, it shows that about 50% of all of you are between 35 and 44, okay? So I don't even remember the point I was going to make there, but oh yes, so it won't take you another 35 to 44 years to create a new mental habit, right? You have a mental habit now that is based on all these experiences. Every time you experience something good, you called it good. Every time you experience something bad, you called it bad, right? So that's a habit of your mind. That's a conditioned habit of your mind. It does not take another 35 to 44 years to create a new, more beneficial, not good, but a more beneficial habit of the mind. In fact, studies show you're talking about, like maybe 2 months, somewhere around there, before you start like habitually catching yourself and saying, no, what's a more, more descriptive word than good for this thing? And it's not something you're going to be kind of talking to yourself in your mind the whole time either, right? After a few weeks, it's going to be just fluid and sort of automatic. But my gosh, folks, it's so huge. It is so huge. Because what's the opposite of the aversion and the attachment, right? The opposite of those are acceptance and letting go. And just think of how much of the stress, how much of the anxiety, how much of the bad moods, how much of the conflicts in your life arise from the inability to accept something that you think is bad, or to let go of something that's supposed to be good. Now, this is where it gets into some really deep stuff too. Like this, again, we're talking about very surface level stuff here, but as you continue to do this, you get into the really deep stuff, which is most of the things that we feel pain from and we feel suffering from in our lives. It's very often something that we want to be permanent that is not permanent. That's on the positive side, right? Anytime you lose something, anytime, the ending of something, right? Whether it's the ending of a summer vacation, or it's the loss of a loved one, right? When we lose something, the reason why we suffer from losing that thing is because, in most cases, is because we're attached to that thing. And we can't allow that thing not to be here. And the reason why we feel that is because we're saying that not having this thing is bad. Meaning, somebody passing away is bad. There is absolutely nothing bad about somebody passing away. Our interpretation of it might be a negative interpretation. I miss that person. I love them. I'm going to miss them. It's going to feel emptiness without them in my life. But that is not bad. That is just a normal response to something that is inevitable, which is impermanence, right? There's nothing permanent. Not even the sun in the sky is permanent. Eventually, in billions of years from now, that sun will not be there shining in the sky anymore. But this is also something we practice because we believe that it's permanent because it's permanent for us, right? It's always there in my life, and there'll never be a time in my life where it's not there. And so, right? So it is permanent for me, but it's not permanent. And that's where, again, when we can see permanence and impermanence not as good or bad, we can see those as just sort of concepts that we process for ourselves. Well, then that frees us to be able to really see them. And that applies to everything. Right? Because when we're judging something as bad, we're shutting the doors in our mind. It's like, like the DMV at 5:00, all the windows just shut right away, right? And we're not able to experience curiosity. We're not able to inquire. We're not able to learn, to heal, to grow in any of that because of the judgment. The opposite of judgment is curiosity. Right? Judgment is where I'm labeling something. I'm determining it is this. Curiosity is where I'm saying, what is this? Completely different thing, and a completely different, signal to our whole system. Okay? So anyway, I'm going to wrap it up here because I've been talking a lot, and I'm sure that I'm at this point just repeating myself again and just in different ways. So I'm going to leave it there, and I'm going to invite you to ask me any questions you have about this, okay? But more than that, I invite and I even encourage you to really do this practice. You're going to be amazed. First of all, you're going to be amazed at how many times we do this, right? And secondly, you're going to be amazed at the benefit of being able to pay attention to it. I promise you. And it's not like Sharon Salzberg says, we don't meditate to get better at meditation. We meditate to get better at life. And so we're not doing this practice of finding a more descriptive word for things we're labeling as good or bad, just so that we get better at labeling the things in our life, right? We're doing it because once we do that, we're not going to feel the stress anymore. And at the same way, we're not going to feel the negative emotions anymore. We're not going to, the story in our mind is not going to be as critical, as hateful sometimes, as combative. And we get to live in a place of comfort and ease and happiness. Not like heavenly. I mean, there's still going to be times where, it does. And that's the other thing, that non-judging awareness doesn't do anything for the outer circumstances, right? You can be practicing non-judging awareness and still experience a very difficult moment in your life, right? Accidents are still going to happen. Loss and gain and all that stuff is still going to happen. But we learn to ride those waves. Like Jon Kabat-Zinn says, you can't stop the waves, but you can learn how to surf. Non-judging awareness is allowing you to surf through the highs and the lows of our lives in a way that does not cause the tension and the stress and the anxiety and the interpersonal conflicts that arise from all of those, and intrapersonal conflicts that arise from all of those as well. It's a sweeter life, my friends. It's a sweeter life. And then we realize that, when we're not labeling things as good or bad, the real universal sort of benefit of this is we realize that we're just here to experience it and to learn from it and to grow from it and to heal from it. And it being anything, every moment of our lives, the positive and the negative, the good and the bad. All right. So let me know if you have any questions. All right. I hope you all enjoyed this. It was, I'm doing this in the middle of the day where I normally do these in the morning. So I think my energy might feel a little different. I, hope that came through okay. But let me know if you have any questions. Okay. But really, this practice, I'm telling you, this has moved right up to the top of my list of practices. In fact, the clients I'm going to meet with tomorrow are all going to hear about this practice. So I invite you to try it too. And I would love to hear from you. Tell me how it works. Tell me how, in 2-3 weeks of your trying it, tell me what you're finding, right? And that's the best way to approach it. Don't approach it like you're trying to get it right. Don't approach it like it's supposed to be good, right? But approach it as just a curiosity. Let's see what happens if I do this. All right? All right, everybody. Thanks again for watching. Thank you for listening. I wish you well. Definitely not going to record in the next day or two because I got too much going on. So I'll see you at some point next week. All right, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.